I thought I was just showing up for another family dinner, smiling enough for the photos, then driving home. But when a glass of orange juice accidentally spilled on my stepmother's dress, she slapped me across the face in front of everyone. That was the exact moment I quietly pulled out the file folder I had been preparing for the police for 3 long years. My name is Serenity Taylor. I am 27 years old, and I live in a shoebox apartment just a few blocks from the Space Needle in Seattle, to the outside world, specifically on my carefully curated LinkedIn profile. I am the content lead at Pixel Rise Media, a boutique marketing agency where I manage 6-figure campaigns and lead a team of 5 creatives. I am organized, I am articulate, and I am fiercely protective of my team's time. But the moment I drive out of the city limits, heading south toward the manicured lawns of Maple Ridge, that competent, self-assured woman dissolves. She is replaced by someone much smaller, much quieter, and significantly more tired. My father is Douglas Taylor. He was the center of my world for the first 10 years of my life, back when it was just the 3 of us. Him, me, and my mother. When Mom died of cancer, the silence in our house was so loud it felt like it could shatter windows. Dad did not know how to handle the quiet, and he certainly did not know how to handle a grieving preteen daughter. He was a good man. I always told myself that. But he was a weak one. He crumbled without a structure. Then came Victoria Hale. She entered our lives 3 years after Mom passed, sweeping in like a scented gale of expensive perfume and aggressive organization. She was, and still is, a high-performing real estate agent at Harborview Realty Group. She is the kind of woman who has never had a hair out of place, whose lipstick never seems to smudge, and whose smile doesn't quite reach her eyes unless there is a camera lens pointed at her. She brought with her 2 children from a previous marriage, Ethan and Chloe, who were toddlers then, but are now teenagers navigating their own strange orbits around their mother. They all live in Maple Ridge, a suburb about 2 hours away from my apartment in Seattle. It is the kind of town where the Homeowners Association sends you a fine if your grass is half an inch too long. From the day Victoria moved her boxes into our house, the dynamic shifted tectonically. I was no longer just a daughter. I became a utility player in her carefully staged production of a perfect family. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow erosion of my boundaries, so subtle I hardly noticed until I was already buried. It started with small requests. Serenity, honey, could you just watch the stove while I fix my makeup? Became Serenity, can you handle dinner tonight? I have a closing call. By the time I was in high school, and definitely by the time I graduated college, I had been firmly cemented into the role of the family doormat. I remember Ethan's 16th birthday party vividly. It was 2 years ago. Victoria had rented a massive tent for the backyard and invited half the neighborhood, mostly her potential clients. I had driven down from Seattle early that morning, ostensibly to celebrate my stepbrother. Instead, I spent 5 hours in the kitchen. I was arranging canapes, refilling ice buckets, and managing the catering staff who seemed terrified of Victoria. I remember looking out the kitchen window. Victoria was standing on the patio, holding a glass of Chardonnay, laughing with a couple who were looking to buy a lake house. She looked radiant. Her arm was draped around Dad's shoulders, and she was gesturing expansively, playing the part of the gracious hostess to perfection. Ethan was opening gifts. Chloe was filming a TikTok dance with her friends. I was scrubbing a stubborn stain of marinara sauce off the granite counter because Victoria had hissed at me earlier that it looked trashy. By the time I finally dried my hands and walked out to the patio, the cake had already been cut. The speeches were over. Victoria saw me and said, loudly enough for the guests to hear, "Oh, look who finally decided to join us. Serenity is such a perfectionist in the kitchen. We can never get her to come out and socialize." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile, my feet throbbing in my heels, and accepted a slice of the cake I had ordered, picked up, and paid for. It was always like that. Thanksgiving was a 12-hour marathon of peeling potatoes and basting turkeys, while Victoria sat in the living room, entertaining the extended family. Her graduation party for Chloe last spring was another example. I was the one running back and forth to the store for more ice, the one picking up the stray napkins, the one making sure the elderly relatives had water. Victoria had a specific way of justifying it. It was a script she had perfected over the years. She would come into the kitchen where I was sweating over a hot oven, pat my arm with a condescending affection, and say, "Oh, Serenity, you are an angel, really. It is not like you have a family of your own yet. You are free. You have the time. Just help me out this one time, okay? You don't have a family of your own." She repeated it so often that it began to feel like a diagnosis. It implied that my life in Seattle, my career, my friends, my independence, none of it counted as a real life. My value, in her eyes, was entirely strictly derived from my utility to her. I was the spare part, the backup generator, the unpaid help, and the terrifying thing was, after years of hearing it, a part of me had started to believe her. I started to feel guilty for having free time. I started to feel that if I wasn't serving them, I was being selfish. I tried to talk to Dad about it. God knows I tried. But Douglas Taylor had mastered the art of conflict avoidance. He had become a piece of furniture in his own life, polished and presentable but utterly functional only when Victoria decided where to place him. Whenever I cornered him, usually when he was sneaking a cigarette in the garage, he would just look tired. "Ren, honey," he would say, using his childhood nickname for me. "You have to understand, Victoria is under a lot of pressure. She carries a lot of weight for this family. Just be the bigger person, okay? Do it for me. Do it for me." That was the hook that caught me every time. I loved him. Despite his spine being made of water, I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have this perfect family life he seemed to crave. Even if the foundation of that perfection was built on my back. But even a doormat has limits, or so I thought. 6 months ago, I tried to set a boundary. Victoria and Dad were planning a 2-week cruise to the Mediterranean. Victoria assumed, without asking, that I would come down to Maple Ridge and stay in their house to watch their 2 high-maintenance golden retrievers and keep the house lived in for insurance purposes. I had a major product launch at Pixelrise that week. It was the kind of week where I would be sleeping under my desk. So, for the first time in years, I said no. I told them I could not do it. I offered to pay for a premium kennel service. I offered to hire a professional house sitter. The reaction was immediate and nuclear. It didn't happen in person. It happened in the family group chat, titled Taylor Hale Fam, which included Dad, Victoria, Ethan, Chloe, and me. "Victoria, I cannot believe this. After everything we do for you? We just wanted a little break. I guess your fancy job is more important than family safety." Then came the silence from Dad, a silence that spoke louder than any defense. Then Chloe, likely prompted by her mother, texted, "That sucks. Ren, Mom is really crying." I was labeled selfish. I was labeled ungrateful. I was the cold-hearted career woman who didn't care if her father's house got burglarized. For 2 weeks, they iced me out. No calls, no texts, just a cold wall of disapproval. When they returned from the cruise, I eventually apologized just to make the tension stop. I brought them a gift. I resumed my role. The peace was restored. But something in me had fractured. That brings me to last night. I was sitting at my small dining table in Seattle, my laptop open, the blue light illuminating my face. The rain was hammering against the window pane, a classic Seattle downpour. I was looking at my Google Calendar, trying to schedule a weekend trip with my friends for after the new year. I started scrolling back through the year, then the year before that. Every single holiday, every single long weekend, every requested day off. 4th of July, Dad's BBQ, setup and cleanup, Labor Day, Victoria's garden party, manage catering, Christmas Eve, prep dinner at Maple Ridge, Christmas Day, cook and serve. There was not a single block of time in the last 5 years that was purely for me during a major holiday. My entire existence had been colonized by their demands. I looked at tomorrow's entry. Sunday brunch, Maple Ridge. It was supposed to be a pre-Christmas family tradition, just a brunch, Victoria had said, but I knew what that meant. It meant arriving early to set the table. It meant refilling mimosas for aunts and uncles I barely knew. It meant washing the crystal glasses by hand, because the dishwasher etched them. I felt a wave of exhaustion so profound it felt like my bones were turning to lead. But beneath the exhaustion, for the first time, there was something else. It was cold, and it was hard, and it was sharp. I closed my laptop. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. I looked like my mother, but my eyes were harder than hers ever were. "No," I whispered to the empty apartment. I stood up and walked to my closet. On the top shelf, buried under a stack of old sweaters I never wore, was a black leather handbag I hadn't used in 3 years. Inside that bag was a thick black folder. I pulled it down. The dust motes danced in the air. I opened it and flipped through the pages. The paper was cool to the touch. A police report, dated 3 years ago. Photos printed on high-gloss paper showing purple and yellow bruises on a shoulder. A consultation note from a lawyer named Emily. I had kept it as a safety net, a way to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. But as I looked at the documents, I realized a safety net wasn't enough anymore. I needed a weapon. I checked the time. It was 11 at night. I had to drive to Maple Ridge in 10 hours. They expected Serenity, the doormat. They expected the girl who would apologize for taking up space. They expected the daughter who would smile and clean up the mess. This time, I thought, sliding the folder into my current purse, this time would be different. If they wanted a scene, I would give them a scene. If they wanted to treat me like an employee, I would show them my resignation letter. And if Victoria raised her hand to me one more time, just one more time, I wouldn't be calling Dad for help. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep much. I lay there listening to the rain, rehearsing the lines I might have to say, unaware that the reality would be far more dramatic and far more public than anything I could have imagined in the dark. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany surface of my desk at Pixelrise was not just a sound. It was a physical intrusion. It was Friday afternoon, 2 days before the brunch, and I was in the middle of approving the final copy for a skincare brand launch that was scheduled to go live on Monday morning. My team was buzzing around the open plan office, carrying coffees and tablets, the air alive with the productive hum of deadline energy. I felt capable. I felt in control. Then I looked at the screen. Victoria Hale calling. My stomach dropped. It is a cliché to say your stomach drops, but for me, it is a very specific physiological reaction. It starts as a tightening in the throat, then a cold flush of adrenaline that hits the solar plexus, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion before I have even answered. It is the body's way of preparing for a siege. I let it ring 3 times. If I did not answer, she would call my work landline. If I did not answer that, she would call Dad. And then Dad would call me in a panic, asking if I was in a hospital. It was easier to just pick up. "Hello, Victoria," I said, keeping my voice flat and professional, the same tone I used with difficult vendors. "Serenity, darling!" Her voice was an assault of weaponized cheerfulness. It was high, bright, and loud enough that I had to lower the volume on my handset. I was just looking at the calendar and realized we haven't locked down the details for Sunday. I am so excited. The whole family is going to be here. She said whole family with a pointed emphasis, a subtle underlining that implied I was currently on the outside of that circle, looking in. "Sunday," I repeated, though I knew exactly what she was talking about. "The pre-Christmas brunch! The tradition!" she exclaimed. "I have ordered those pastries you like from the bakery in downtown Maple Ridge, and I am making my signature quiche. Everyone is coming. The Petersons, the Millers, even your cousin Sarah is driving up." I took a breath. This was the moment. I had practiced this. "Victoria, I actually can't make it this Sunday," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I have plans already. I am going skiing with Jade and a few friends. We booked a cabin near the mountain months ago. I won't be in town." There was a silence on the other end. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes a vacuum implosion. "Skiing," she said. The cheerfulness had evaporated, replaced by a tone of icy disbelief. "You are going skiing? This Sunday? The Sunday before Christmas?" "Yes," I said. "It is the only weekend we could all get off work." "I see," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "So, let me get this straight. You are choosing to go slide down a hill with some drinking buddies rather than spend time with your father? You know how much this means to him. Serenity. He has been talking about having everyone together all week. He looks so forward to these traditions." The guilt trip was immediate and precise. She did not say, "I want you there." She said, "Your father wants you there." She used him as a human shield. "It is not about choosing friends over Dad," I argued, feeling the familiar defensive crouch taking over my posture. "I see Dad often. This trip has been paid for." "Money," she scoffed. "Of course. Well, if a few $100s is more important to you than your family, I suppose I cannot stop you. I just feel terrible for Douglas. He's going to be heartbroken. He barely asks for anything. Serenity, really, is it so hard to give him one morning?" Then, as if on cue, I heard a rustling sound, and my father's voice came on the line. She must have had him on speaker, or she shoved the phone at him. "Ren, you're not coming?" Dad's voice sounded small. It always sounded small when Victoria was in the room. "I thought you were coming. I bought that sparkling cider you like." "Dad, I have this trip," I said, feeling my resolve cracking like cheap glass. "I told you about it weeks ago." "Did you? I must have forgot," he said. He sounded tired. "Look, honey, can't you just drive up for the morning? You can leave right after food. I really want a picture of all of us. Just one nice morning, please?" I closed my eyes. I could see him standing in their immaculate kitchen, probably wearing his old cardigan, looking at Victoria for approval. "Dad, I really need a break," I whispered. "I promise. No work," he said quickly, his voice lifting with a desperate sort of hope. "I promise. Victoria and I talked about it. You are a guest. You just come, eat, we laugh, you leave, no cleaning, no cooking, just be my daughter. Please, Ren, for me." For me? The magic words, the shackles. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I will come, but I have to leave by 1 in the afternoon to meet my friends." "That is wonderful." Victoria's voice was back, loud and triumphant. She had reclaimed the phone. "Oh, I knew you would do the right thing. We are so relieved." I rubbed my temple, staring at the spreadsheet on my screen that no longer made sense. "Okay, I will be there at 10. "Actually," Victoria said, her tone breezy, "could you get here around 9? Or maybe 8:30? The cleaning crew canceled on me last minute, and I just need someone to help me lay out the good silver and fold the napkins properly. You know how Chloe is. She cannot fold a napkin to save her life, and I want the table to look perfect for the photos. It will only take 20 minutes, since you are coming anyway." I froze. The promise was not even 60 seconds old. No cleaning, no work, just be a guest. And in the very next breath, she was asking me to come an hour and a half early to set the table. "Dad just said no work," I said, my grip on the phone tightening. "Oh, stop it. Serenity," she laughed, a dismissive, tinkling sound. "Helping set the table isn't work. It is being part of the family. Don't be so transactional. It is unbecoming. Just get here early. We are counting on you. Bye." The line went dead. I sat there, holding the phone, listening to the dial tone. The nausea was real now. It churned in my stomach, a mix of anger and self-loathing. I had done it again. I had walked right into the trap that I saw coming from a mile away. I had let them manipulate me, cancel my plans, and immediately assign me a job, all in the span of a 3-minute phone call. If I didn't go now, I was the villain who broke her promise to her father. If I did go, I was the servant. I slammed the phone down on the desk, startling my colleague, Mark, who sat across from me. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking over his monitor. Peachy, I muttered. My cell phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire series of vibrations. I looked down. It was the Hale Taylor clan group chat. This chat included not just the immediate family, but 3 of Victoria's sisters, my dad's brother, and a few cousins. Victoria. Great news, everyone! Serenity canceled her ski trip to be with us for the Christmas brunch. Victoria. Finally growing up and realizing that family is the most important thing. So proud of her for getting her priorities straight. Aunt Linda. That is so sweet. Can't wait to see you. Serenity. Cousin Mike. Wow. Shocked you bailed on a party. Ren, good for you. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with rage. She was spinning the narrative in real time. She was painting a picture where I was the wayward child who had finally seen the light, and she was the benevolent matriarch who had guided me back. She had stripped me of my agency, to the extended family. I wasn't a woman who had been guilt-tripped into changing her plans. I was a reformed party girl who had finally learned values. I wanted to type back. I wanted to write, I didn't cancel because I wanted to. I canceled because you emotionally blackmailed Dad. But I didn't, because that would make me the drama queen. That would make me unstable. That would prove every whisper she had ever started about me. Then, a separate notification popped up, a private message from Dad. Dad. Thank you, honey. I know you wanted to go skiing. This means a lot to me. Please don't be sour when you get here, okay? Don't make your stepmother sad on a holiday. She has worked really hard on the menu. I stared at the words, don't make your stepmother sad. He wasn't worried about me being sad. He wasn't worried that I had lost my deposit on the cabin or that I was disappointing my friends. His primary concern, his only concern, was managing Victoria's emotional state. He was deputizing me as a co-manager of her moods. I put the phone face down on the desk. I took a deep breath, counting to 10. I looked around the office. I looked at the awards on the shelf behind me. I looked at the project timeline I had built from scratch. I was a leader here. I was respected here. People asked for my opinion and listened to the answer. Why did I turn into a ghost the moment I crossed the city limits? Serenity? Mark asked again, his voice gentle. You look like you want to kill someone. No, I said, picking up my pen and clicking it. Once, twice, 3 times. Not kill. I just want to be done. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Sunday, Maple Ridge. I would go because I loved my father, even though his love for me was wrapped in cowardice. I would go because I had said I would. But as I sat there, the anger didn't dissipate like it usually did. Usually, the anger would fade into a dull ache of resignation. Today, it crystallized. It hardened. I remembered the black folder in my bag at home. I will be there at 9, I thought to myself. I will set the table, but I'm leaving at 1 o'clock sharp, and if she snaps her fingers at me, if she calls me useless, if she tries to make me feel small. I didn't finish the thought. I didn't need to. The feeling was enough. I picked up my phone one last time and typed a quick message to Jade. Me. I have to go to the brunch. Family emergency. But don't cancel my spot. I am driving up to the mountain the second I get out of there. I will be there for dinner. Jade. Ugh, she got to you? Ren. You have to stop letting her do this. Me. I know. This is the last time. And for the first time in my life, when I typed, this is the last time, I actually meant it. I wasn't just hoping for it to be true. I was ready to make it true. I went back to work, but the focus was different now. I wasn't just editing copy. I was sharpening my mind. I was preparing for a confrontation I hoped wouldn't happen, but one I was suddenly, terrifyingly ready for. The invitation was a trap, yes, but Victoria didn't realize that by forcing me into the corner, she was also forcing me to finally reach for the only weapon I had left. Sunday was coming, and for once, I wasn't just dreading it, I was waiting for it. The steam from the shower had fogged up the bathroom mirror of my Seattle apartment, turning my reflection into a ghostly gray smear. It was Saturday night, outside. The city was alive with the sound of traffic and rain. But inside, the silence was heavy. I wiped a hand across the glass, clearing a jagged streak of visibility. I looked at myself, dark circles under my eyes, wet hair plastered to my neck, and pale skin that looked too fragile for the war I felt I was constantly fighting. I turned sideways to reach for a towel, and that was when I saw it. It was faint now, just a thin, silvery line running across the top of my left shoulder, jagged and slightly raised against the smooth skin. I usually ignored it. I usually covered it with cardigans or high-necked blouses, but tonight, under the harsh vanity lights, it seemed to pulse. It was a map. It was a coordinate in time that marked the exact moment when mean stepmother crossed the line into criminal assault. I touched it, and instantly, the steam in the bathroom seemed to vanish, replaced by the smell of burnt sugar and expensive cleaning products. I was back in the kitchen at Maple Ridge. It was 3 years ago. We were hosting a dinner for the partners at Dad's architecture firm. Victoria had decided on a French theme. I had been cooking for 6 hours straight. The main course had gone perfectly, but the dessert, crème brûlée, was the finale Victoria was banking on. She had bought a culinary torch and instructed me on exactly how to caramelize the sugar. But the torch was faulty, or maybe my hand shook. The sugar on 3 of the ramekins went from golden to black in a split second. The smell of charred sweetness filled the kitchen. Victoria walked in at that exact moment. She didn't scream. Screaming would have been too human. She went rigid. Her eyes, usually so carefully composed, went dead. "You ruin everything," she hissed, her voice low and vibrating with a rage that felt disproportionate to the situation. "I gave you one simple task." "I can scrape it off," I stammered, reaching for a spoon. "I can fix it." "Fix it? You can't fix anything." She grabbed a heavy ceramic dinner plate from the counter, one of the ones waiting to be plated, and she didn't just drop it. She threw it. She threw it right at the wall behind me. But her aim was off. Or maybe she didn't care where it landed. The plate shattered against the granite backsplash, and a large, jagged shard flew backward, slicing across my shoulder. I cried out, clutching my arm. Blood, bright and alarming, started to seep through my fingers, staining my white shirt. Victoria didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was okay. She stepped forward, grabbed my uninjured arm, and shoved me hard against the counter. Her grip was like iron. Her face was inches from mine, her breath smelling of wine and mints. "Look at this mess," she spat, shaking me. "Now you are bleeding all over my floor. You make me look like a joke. You make me look incompetent in front of my guests because you are too stupid to use a torch." The kitchen door swung open. Dad rushed in, drawn by the sound of the smashing plate. He stopped, looking at the broken ceramic, the blood on my shirt, and Victoria gripping me. For 1 second, I thought he would yell. I thought he would protect me. "Victoria," he said, his voice pleading, not angry. "Honey, the guests will hear. Don't overdo it." Don't overdo it. Not stop hurting my daughter. Not, "What is wrong with you?" Just a request to keep the volume down. Victoria released me with a shove. "Get her out of here," she said to Dad, turning her back to check the other desserts, "and clean up this blood before the Petersons come in for coffee." Dad drove me to the urgent care center 3 towns over, presumably so no one in Maple Ridge would see us. He sat in the waiting room, head in his hands, while I got 7 stitches. The nurse was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands. She looked at the jagged cut. She looked at the bruising on my upper arm where Victoria had grabbed me. She looked at my tear-stained face. "Honey," she said quietly, lowering her voice so the doctor wouldn't hear. "This cut came from a ceramic shard, you said? A plate fell?" "Yes," I whispered. "And the bruises?" she asked, gently touching the finger marks on my arm. "Did the plate grab you too?" I stayed silent. She finished taping the gauze. "I am required to ask," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "Do you feel safe at home? Do you want to speak to an officer? This does not look like an accident to me. This looks like assault." My heart hammered against my ribs. Assault. It was such a big word. It was a word for the news, for strangers, not for the woman who married my father. I fell, I lied, but my voice shook. The nurse sighed. She handed me a discharge paper. On the back, she had written the address of the local police station and a domestic violence hotline. "Just in case," she said. "You are not crazy, and you are not clumsy. Remember that." I walked out to the car where Dad was waiting. He looked relieved that it was over. "Ready?" he asked. "Victoria is very upset. We should pick up some flowers on the way back." That was the moment something broke. Not a bone, but a tether. "You go home, Dad," I said. "I need to pick up a prescription." I didn't go to the pharmacy. I took an Uber to the police station on the card the nurse gave me. I sat in a cold, fluorescent-lit room with a young officer who looked tired. I told him everything. I told him about the plate. I told him about the shoving. I showed him the stitches and the bruises. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "We can arrest her tonight." I thought about Ethan and Chloe. I thought about Dad, terrified and weak. I thought about having nowhere to go if I blew up my life right then. I was 24, just starting my career, barely making rent. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "Not tonight, but I want a report. I want it on record. I want a paper trail that says this happened." He filed it. "Domestic incident report, 40922. I got a copy. I folded it until it was a tiny square and hid it in the lining of my winter coat." That night changed the dynamic. I think Victoria knew, on some primal level, that she had gone too far. Or maybe Dad actually said something to her in private. She never hit me again. Instead, she evolved. She realized that physical bruises were liabilities. They could be photographed. They required stitches. So she switched to psychological warfare. It was cleaner. It was invisible. She began a campaign of isolation. At family gatherings, if I laughed too loud, she would touch my arm and whisper, "Serenity, calm down. People are staring." If I got passionate about a topic, she would apologize to the guests. "You have to forgive her. She is going through a very unstable phase right now." She gaslit me constantly. She would tell me to arrive at noon, then claim she said 10 in the morning and ask why I was late. She would lose the gifts I bought for the family and claim I never brought them. She painted a portrait of me as a frantic, unreliable, mentally fragile mess, and she painted it so artfully that even Dad started to look at me with pity instead of pride. But she didn't know about the nurse, and she didn't know about Jade. Jade was my best friend at Pixel Rise. She was tough, tattooed, and had walked away from an abusive marriage 5 years prior. One night, over drinks, I broke down and told her about the unstable comments and the memory of the plate. Jade didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. "She is waiting for you to crack," Jade said, slamming her beer down. "She wants you to look crazy so that if you ever tell the truth about the physical stuff, no one will believe you. You need to become a spy in your own life." "A spy?" I asked. "Document everything," Jade commanded. "Every text where she calls you names, every email where she lies about the time, voice record her when she starts yelling. Keep it all. One day, you will need to build a case." So I did. For 3 years, I became a hoarder of hatred. I have a folder on my laptop titled Taxes 2020. Inside are screenshots of Victoria texting me, "You are ungrateful trash, just like your mother was." I have recordings on my phone of her screaming at me for loading the dishwasher wrong. Her voice demonic, completely different from her public persona. I have the emails to Dad where I calmly explained my boundaries, and his replies begging me to just apologize to keep the peace. 6 months ago, Jade took me to meet Emily Rhodes. Emily was a lawyer who specialized in high-conflict family law. She worked out of a small office that smelled of old books and coffee. She listened to my story for an hour without interrupting. She looked at the photo of my stitches. She read the old police report. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. "You have a loaded gun here. Serenity," Emily said. "The statute of limitations on the assault hasn't run out because you filed that report. It establishes a history, but the psychological stuff? That is harder to prove in court without a catalyst. What constitutes a catalyst? I asked. Escalation, Emily said. She has been smart to keep her hands off you, but abusers like this, they eventually slip. They get comfortable. If she ever touches you again, a slap, a shove, a grab, and you have this history documented, we don't just sue for assault, we go for everything. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, punitive damages. We can bury her. I don't want to bury her, I had said then. I just want her to stop. Sometimes, Emily said, sliding her card across the desk. The only way to make them stop is to show them you have a shovel. Back in my bathroom, the steam had cleared completely. I looked at the scar again. It wasn't just a mark of pain anymore. It was the first page of my dossier. I walked out to my living room. My suitcase for the brunch was open on the couch. I had packed a dress. Modest, boring, something that wouldn't draw attention. Then I went to my bookshelf. I pulled down the black accordion folder where I kept the hard copies, the police report, yellowing slightly at the edges, the printouts of the texts, the USB drive with the audio files, the medical bill from the urgent care. I weighed it in my hand. It was light, maybe half a pound, but it felt heavier than a brick. I had never taken it to Maple Ridge before. I usually left it here, safe in my sanctuary. Taking it with me felt dangerous. It felt like carrying a grenade into a church. If she touches you again, Emily's voice echoed in my head. I didn't think she would. She was too careful. She cared too much about her reputation. But something about that phone call, the way she had manipulated my schedule, the way she had forced me into servitude before I even arrived, made my skin crawl. The air felt thinner this time. The tension was tighter. I opened my large leather tote bag. I slid the black folder into the back pocket, behind my laptop and my makeup bag. It disappeared into the darkness of the leather. Just in case, I whispered to myself, repeating the nurse's words from 3 years ago. I wasn't planning to use it. I truly wasn't. I wanted to go, eat the quiche, smile at the cousins, wash the dishes, and leave at 1 o'clock to go skiing. I wanted peace. But as I zipped the bag shut, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to Maple Ridge as a victim. I was going as a witness. I wasn't just bringing lipstick and a host gift. I was bringing a documented history of violence. I turned off the lights in my apartment. The folder sat in the bag by the door, silent and waiting. I didn't know it then, but I had just packed the match that would burn the whole house down. The drive to Maple Ridge was a blur of gray highway and windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the Pacific Northwest drizzle. It was the kind of December morning that felt less like a holiday and more like a wet wool blanket draped over the world. My heater was blasting, but I couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep in my marrow. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, repeating my mantra like a prayer. 3 hours, I said aloud to the empty car. In, eat, out, no cleaning, no staying late, just 3 hours. I checked the dashboard clock. It was 8:55 in the morning. If I stuck to the plan, I would be back on the road by noon, driving toward the mountains, toward fresh powder and Jade's laughter, and a version of myself that didn't feel like a servant. I pulled into the driveway of my father's house, or rather, Victoria's house. Dad just paid the mortgage. Victoria curated the existence within it. The house was a sprawling colonial revival that looked like it had been airlifted directly from the pages of Better Homes and Gardens. A wreath the size of a tractor tire hung on the front door, adorned with velvet ribbons and frosted pine cones. Electric candles flickered in every window, perfectly synchronized. It was beautiful, aggressive, and completely soulless. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror to ensure my neutral daughter face was in place, and stepped out into the cold. The moment I opened the front door, I was assaulted by the scent of cinnamon, balsam fir, and expensive perfume. The house was warm, almost stiflingly so. Classical violin music played softly from invisible speakers. "Serenity, you made it!" Victoria glided into the foyer before I could even take off my coat. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater dress that probably cost more than my first car, paired with nude heels that looked impossible to walk in. Her hair was an architectural marvel of blonde waves, not a single strand out of place. "Hi, Victoria," I said, forcing a smile. "The house looks lovely." "Oh, it is a disaster. Truly," she lied effortlessly, leaning in for an air kiss that didn't touch my skin. "I am so glad you are early. Listen, the caterer sent the fruit platter, but it is just a mess, just a heap of melons. Could you be a darling and arrange it on the crystal tier? You know, make it look edible?" I would do it, but I have to curl my eyelashes. I froze, my hands still on the strap of my bag, the bag containing the black folder. It had not even been 30 seconds. I hadn't even said hello to my father yet. "Victoria, I really just came to visit," I started, my voice tight. "It will take 10 minutes. Serenity," she said, her eyes widening with feigned innocence. "Don't be difficult before you have even taken your coat off. Your father is in the garage looking for ice. Be a sweetie." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there. The trap had sprung. If I refused, I was the Grinch who wouldn't help with a simple fruit platter. If I did it, I was the help. I ground my teeth, hung up my coat, and walked to the kitchen. The kitchen was a war zone of high-end gastronomy, trays of mini quiches, smoked salmon blinis, and artisanal cheeses covered every surface. I found the fruit platter. It was fine. It was perfectly fine. But to Victoria, fine was an insult. I spent the next 20 minutes carving kiwi into stars and arranging grapes into cascading clusters, feeling the familiar heavy stone of resentment settling in my stomach. "Hey, Ren!" I turned to see Ethan and Chloe standing in the doorway. They were dressed in matching plaid, clearly their mother's choice. Ethan was 16 now, tall and gangly, buried in his phone. Chloe was 14, already wearing a full face of makeup that made her look older and sadder. "Hey, guys," I said, wiping strawberry juice off my hands. "You look nice." "Mom made us wear this," Ethan mumbled, not looking up. "She said if we stain it, she is taking away the Xbox." "Is it true you tried to bail on today?" Chloe asked. Her voice wasn't malicious, just curious. "Mom said you hate coming here." I paused, holding a slice of cantaloupe. This was the narrative Victoria spun. She poured poison in their ears so slowly they didn't even taste it. "I don't hate coming here," I said gently. "I just had a ski trip planned, but I wanted to see you guys." "Oh," Chloe said. She looked at me, searching for the monster her mother described, but just seeing her tired stepsister in an apron. "Well, cool. Dad is weirdly stressed out today, so good luck." They drifted away, retreating to the safety of their rooms until the performance began. I watched them go, feeling a pang of pity. They were trapped in this dollhouse full time. I only had to survive it for 3 hours. By 10 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. These were not close friends. They were strategic alliances. There were the Thompsons, who owned the local luxury car dealership. There was Mrs. Higgins, the head of the charity board Victoria was desperate to join. There were colleagues from Harborview Realty, all teeth and firm handshakes. The noise level rose. The champagne corks popped. I stood near the kitchen island, watching the scene unfold like a play I had seen 100 times. Victoria was in her element. She floated from group to group, laughing her tinkling laugh, touching arms, accepting compliments with practiced humility. "Victoria, this quiche is divine," Mrs. Higgins exclaimed. "And the house. How do you manage a career in a home like this?" "Oh, it is a labor of love," Victoria cooed. "I just want my family to have the best." She didn't mention that I had woken up at 6 in the morning in Seattle to drive here. She didn't mention I had been arranging fruit and plating appetizers for an hour. "And is this your stepdaughter?" a man in a navy blazer asked, gesturing toward me. Victoria turned, her smile tightening just a fraction at the corners. She waved me over. I walked into the circle, feeling like a prop being dragged out of storage. "Yes, this is Serenity," Victoria said, draping an arm around my shoulder. Her grip was firm, possessive. Douglas's girl. Nice to meet you, I said, extending my hand. I am Serenity. Serenity lives in the city, Victoria continued, breezing past my introduction. She does. Oh, what is it you do again? Honey? Something with the internet? Facebooks and TikToks? She knew exactly what I did. I had explained my role as content lead at Pixelrise Media to her 5 times. I managed a budget of $200,000 a quarter. I led strategy for national brands. I work in digital marketing, I said, keeping my voice steady. I manage content strategy for a firm in downtown Seattle. Right, Victoria laughed, a dismissive sound that invited the guest to laugh with her. She is on her phone all day, I tell her. Serenity, real estate is where the money is. But you know millennials, they love their little apps. I suppose it keeps her busy until she settles down. The man in the blazer chuckled. My grandson is the same, wants to be a YouTuber. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. In 2 sentences. She had reduced my career to a hobby for unemployed teenagers. She had framed me as unserious, a child playing with a phone while the adults did real work. I looked across the room for Dad. He was standing by the fireplace, opening a bottle of Merlot. He heard her. I knew he heard her. He looked up, caught my eye, and for a second, I saw the apology in his face. But then he looked down at the bottle, twisting the corkscrew with intense fascination, pretending he was deaf. The betrayal stung more than the insult. Excuse me, I said to the group. I need to check on the oven. I retreated to the kitchen, but it felt too small, too crowded with the remnants of Victoria's ambition. I slipped out the back door onto the covered patio. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and clarifying. It was snowing lightly now, tiny flakes dusting the manicured hedges. I leaned against the railing, taking deep gulps of the freezing air. My hands were shaking. Don't cry, I whispered. Do not give her the satisfaction. You have 2 hours left. Just eat, smile, leave. I looked at my watch. 10:45. I could do this. I was an adult. I had a life, a career, a folder full of evidence in my bag. I didn't need their approval. I was just steadying my breathing when the sliding glass door opened. I tensed, expecting Victoria coming to scold me for hiding. But it was just the noise of the party spilling out. Laughter, clinking glasses, the warmth of a family gathering that I was effectively exiled from. Serenity! Victoria's voice cut through the din. She wasn't on the patio. She was yelling from the dining room, her voice projecting so everyone could hear. Serenity, darling, where did you wander off to? I stepped back inside, brushing the snow off my sleeves. I am here, Victoria. She was standing at the head of the table, holding an empty crystal pitcher. The table was fully set now, a masterpiece of silver and white linen. The guests were finding their seats. There you are, she said, flashing a strained smile that told me I was already in trouble for disappearing. We need more orange juice, freshly squeezed. The Petersons' kids are asking for it, and we ran out of the store-bought stuff. There is a bag of oranges in the pantry, and the electric juicer is under the counter. Be a dear and whip up a pitcher. The kids love it. It sounded so simple. Make some juice for the kids. A harmless, domestic request. But I looked at the table. Everyone was seated. Dad was pouring wine. The food was being passed around. If I went to make juice now, I would be stuck in the kitchen for another 20 minutes. I would miss the toast. I would be serving them while they ate. Victoria, can't they just have apple cider? I asked quietly. I haven't sat down yet. The room went slightly quiet. The guests sensed the friction. Victoria's eyes flashed. It was a microscopic shift, invisible to anyone who didn't know her. Serenity, she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, disappointed register. It takes 5 minutes. Don't make a scene over orange juice. It is Christmas. It is Christmas, the ultimate trump card. I looked at Dad. He was studying his napkin. I looked at the guests. They were watching me, waiting to see if the unstable stepdaughter would ruin the nice lady's brunch. I swallowed the lump of rage in my throat. "Okay," I said. "I will make it." "Thank you," she chirped, turning back to Mrs. Higgins. "She is such a help, really." I walked into the kitchen. I found the oranges. I found the heavy electric juicer. I sliced the fruit with mechanical precision, listening to the laughter in the other room. 5 minutes. I told myself, just 5 minutes, and then I sit down, shovel some food in my mouth, and I leave forever. I filled the heavy glass pitcher with bright, pulp-filled orange juice. It was full to the brim. I wiped the bottom of the pitcher with a towel. I took a deep breath, put on my mask of compliance, and pushed through the swinging door into the dining room. The room was packed. The chairs were pushed out, making the walkway narrow. I navigated carefully between the guests, holding the pitcher with both hands. "Here we go," I thought. "Just put it on the table and sit down." I was 3 steps away from Victoria. She was laughing at a joke, her head thrown back, her white cashmere dress gleaming under the chandelier. She looked perfect. The scene looked perfect. I didn't know that in exactly 10 seconds, the perfection was going to shatter, and the rest of my life was going to begin. The glass pitcher was heavy, slick with condensation, and filled to the brim with the bright orange liquid I had just spent 10 minutes squeezing by hand. I held it with both hands, navigating the tight squeeze between the mahogany sideboard and the backs of the guests' chairs. The dining room was a cacophony of silverware scraping against china, and the low roar of 20 people talking at once. It felt hot. The heating was cranked up too high, and the scent of roast turkey and expensive perfume was starting to make me feel lightheaded. "Excuse me," I murmured, sliding past Mrs. Higgins. "Just bringing the juice?" I was 3 feet away from the table. My goal was the empty coaster right in front of Victoria. I just needed to set it down. If I could set it down, I could sit. If I could sit, I could disappear. I took a step forward. At that exact moment, Mr. Thompson, the car dealership owner sitting to Victoria's right, decided to push his chair back to cross his legs. He didn't look. He didn't check behind him. He just shoved the heavy wooden chair backward with a sudden, forceful jerk. The back of the chair hit my hip bone hard. It wasn't a violent shove, but it was unexpected enough to throw off my center of gravity. I stumbled. My heel caught on the edge of the thick Persian rug. My hands instinctively tightened on the pitcher, but the sudden jolt sent the liquid inside sloshing violently against the glass walls. It happened in slow motion. I saw the wave of orange juice crest over the lip of the pitcher. I tried to pull it back, to compensate, but physics was faster than my reflexes. A thick cascading sheet of pulpy orange juice launched itself out of the pitcher. It flew through the air, an arc of citrus disaster, and landed directly in the lap of Victoria Hale. It didn't just hit her, it saturated her. The juice soaked instantly into the creamy white cashmere of her sweater dress. It splashed up onto her neck. It dripped down onto the pristine white tablecloth. The silence that followed was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of orange juice falling from the edge of the table onto the hardwood floor. I stood there, the half-empty pitcher still clutched in my hands, watching the orange stain spread across her chest like a blooming wound. The horror was so physical it felt like a punch to the gut. Victoria didn't move. She looked down at her lap. She touched the wet wool with one manicured finger, then looked at the orange residue on her skin. Her face, which had been animated with laughter just seconds ago, went completely blank. It was the face of a statue. "Oh my God," I gasped, the air rushing back into my lungs. I set the pitcher down on the sideboard with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Victoria, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I grabbed a linen napkin from the nearest place setting and rushed toward her. "Let me help. I can get club soda. Salt. I think salt helps with stains." I reached out to dab at the mess on her dress. "Don't touch me!" Her voice wasn't a scream. It was a low, guttural command that stopped me dead in my tracks. She stood up slowly. The juice dripped from her skirt onto her nude heels. She looked at me, and the mask she wore for the world, the mask of the benevolent stepmother, dissolved. Underneath was pure, unadulterated loathing. "Look at me," she said, her voice trembling with rage. She gestured to her ruined dress, then to the silent table of guests. "Look at what you have done." "It was an accident," I stammered, my hands shaking. "Mr. Thompson moved his chair, and I tripped. I will pay for the dress. I will buy you a new one. I promise. I will write you a check right now for $500, $1,000, whatever it costs." "You think this is about money?" She laughed, a harsh barking sound that made Mrs. Higgins flinch. "You think you can just buy your way out of your incompetence? You ruin everything you touch. Serenity. Every single time you come into this house, you destroy something. You bring chaos." "I didn't mean to," I pleaded. I felt small. I felt like I was 10 years old again, standing over a broken vase. "Please, Mom, it was just an accident." The word slipped out before I could catch it. Mom. I hadn't called her that in years. It was a reflex, a desperate, subconscious attempt to appeal to a maternal instinct she didn't possess. It was the wrong thing to say. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Do not call me that," she hissed. "You are not my daughter. My daughter would not humiliate me in front of the most important people in this town. My daughter knows how to walk across a room without destroying the hostess." She stepped toward me. She was invading my personal space, backing me up against the sideboard. The smell of oranges and expensive perfume was suffocating. "You did this on purpose," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You couldn't stand that we were happy. You couldn't stand that everyone was having a good time. You had to make it about you. You had to be the center of attention." "No," I said, shaking my head, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. "No, Victoria, I swear." "Get out of my face," she snapped. She shoved me. It wasn't a tap. She placed both hands on my shoulders and pushed with real force. I stumbled back, my hip hitting the sideboard hard enough to bruise. The silverware on the surface rattled. A gasp went through the room. I saw Cousin Mike reach into his pocket and pull out his phone, holding it low under the table. "Victoria," Dad said from the head of the table. His voice was weak, terrified. "Victoria, honey, calm down." She said she was sorry. "Shut up, Douglas!" She whipped her head around to scream at him, then turned back to me. "And you stand there with that pathetic look on your face. You are 27 years old, and you are useless, utterly useless. You are a burden to this family. You always have been." Something inside me snapped, not a break, but a click, a locking into place. "I am not a burden," I said. My voice was shaking, but I looked her in the eye. "And I am not the one making a scene. I spilled some juice. You are the one screaming." The defiance hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't used to me talking back. She was used to the doormat. She was used to the girl who cried and cleaned. Her face turned a mottled red. The veins in her neck stood out. In that second, she forgot the guests. She forgot the reputation she had spent 20 years building. She forgot the law. She only saw the object of her resentment daring to stand tall. She pulled her hand back. I saw it coming, but I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Part of me, the part that Jade and Emily had trained, knew I had to let it happen. Smack. The sound was incredibly loud. It was a wet, sharp crack that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Her palm connected with my left cheek with the full force of her body weight behind it. My head snapped to the right. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. The skin on my face felt like it had been touched by a hot iron. I stood there, frozen, my head turned to the side. The room was paralyzed. Ethan and Chloe were standing in the kitchen doorway, their mouths open, their faces pale with shock. Mrs. Higgins had her hand over her mouth. Dad was standing up, his chair knocked over behind him, but he wasn't moving toward me. He was just standing there, Useless. Paralyzed by his own cowardice. I slowly turned my head back to face her. Victoria was breathing hard, her chest heaving. Her hand was still raised slightly, her fingers trembling. She looked at me, and for a split second, I saw a flash of doubt in her eyes. She realized, perhaps too late, that there were witnesses, that this wasn't the kitchen 3 years ago with just the two of us. My cheek pulsed with heat. I could feel the imprint of her fingers rising on my skin. It hurt. God, it hurt. But I didn't cry. I waited for the tears. I waited for the familiar wave of shame and humiliation to buckle my knees, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. It was like stepping out of a humid room into a snowstorm. The fog lifted, the fear evaporated. I looked at her. I looked at the orange juice staining her dress. I looked at my father, who couldn't even look me in the eye. Escalation, Emily had said. If she touches you again. She hadn't just touched me. She had assaulted me in front of 20 credible witnesses. She had given me the catalyst. I straightened my spine. I rolled my shoulders back. I reached down to my side, where my large leather tote bag was sitting on the floor. My hand slid inside. My fingers brushed past my wallet, past my lipstick, and then they found it. The cool, smooth cardboard of the black folder. I gripped it. It felt solid. It felt like power. Victoria was waiting for me to run. She was waiting for me to flee the room in tears so she could spin the story to her guests, tell them I was hysterical, that I provoked her, that she was the victim. I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't look like her stepdaughter anymore. I looked like a woman who had just closed a deal. "Thank you," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it carried to every corner. Victoria blinked, confused. "What?" I kept my hand on the folder. I could feel the edges of the police report inside. "I said thank you," I repeated, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "You just made this very easy for me." I pulled the folder out of the bag. I laid it on the sideboard, right next to the empty pitcher. The black cover looked stark against the white tablecloth. The time for being the victim was over. The time for being the plaintiff had just begun. "Thank you," I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the room like a scalpel. "My domestic violence file on you was getting a little outdated. It is good to have a fresh entry." Victoria stared at me, her chest heaving, the orange juice stain on her dress beginning to dry into a sticky, dark map of her humiliation. For a second, she looked confused, as if I had spoken in a language she did not understand. Then, the confusion curdled back into that familiar, sneering arrogance. She laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound that grated against the festive holiday music still playing softly in the background. "Oh, stop it," she scoffed, waving a hand at me as if shooing away a fly. "You are so dramatic. Serenity. You always have been. You are not going to do anything. You are going to cry in the bathroom for 10 minutes, and then you are going to come back out here and apologize for ruining my brunch. That is what you do. That is who you are." She turned back to the table, picking up her wineglass with a shaking hand. "Everyone, please, I am so sorry. My stepdaughter is having an episode. Let's just—" She stopped talking because I had pulled my phone out. I did not retreat to the bathroom. I did not look at my father for permission. I swiped the screen to unlock it, my thumb moving with a steady, practiced precision. I tapped the green icon, keypad, 911. I pressed the speaker button, not to be theatrical, but because I wanted witnesses. I wanted every single person in this room to hear exactly what I was about to say. The ringing sound echoed in the hushed dining room. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Serenity?" Dad said, his voice trembling. "Ren, what are you doing? Put that away." "Emergency services. What is your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. I looked Victoria dead in the eye. She had lowered her wineglass. Her mouth was slightly open. "My name is Serenity Taylor," I said, my voice calm, devoid of tears, devoid of the panic that usually defined my interactions with this family. I am at 42 Maplewood Drive in Maple Ridge. I need to report an assault in progress." "Assault?" Victoria shrieked. "Are you insane?" "I have just been struck in the face by my stepmother, Victoria Hale," I continued, speaking over her screeching. "There is a room full of witnesses, and I need you to note that there is a documented history of domestic violence at this address. Police report number 409-22. The mention of the police report number was the turning point. I saw the color drain from Victoria's face. It was not just a shade of pale. It was a ghostly, translucent gray. She didn't know I had that number memorized. She didn't know I had ever filed it. "Serenity, stop!" Douglas yelled. My father, the man who had spent my entire life blending into the wallpaper, suddenly found the energy to move. He lunged across the space between us, his hand reaching for my phone. "Give me that!" he shouted, panic distorting his features. "You are ruining everything. Hang up." I didn't flinch. I took a sharp step back, dodging his grasping hand with a fluidity I didn't know I possessed. I held the phone up high, out of his reach. "Do not touch me," I said to him, my voice dropping an octave. It was cold. It was lethal. "If you try to take this phone, Dad, I will tell the operator you are obstructing a call for help. Do you want to be arrested alongside your wife?" He froze. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see his little girl. He saw a stranger. He backed away, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, his eyes darting nervously toward the guests. "Ma'am, are you safe right now?" the operator asked. "I am separated from the attacker, but she is still in the room," I replied. "Please send an officer." "We have a unit 3 minutes away," the operator said. "Stay on the line." I lowered the phone but kept the line open. I walked over to the sideboard where I had placed the black folder. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. 20 people were watching me. They were paralyzed, their polite social training completely failing them in the face of raw reality. I unzipped the bag. I pulled out the folder. I opened it. "You all think I am crazy," I said, addressing the room. I wasn't yelling. I was presenting. "Victoria has spent years telling you I am unstable, that I am difficult, that I make things up." I picked up the first document. It was the glossy 8x10 photograph of my shoulder from 3 years ago. The purple and black bruising was hideous, a stark contrast to the white tablecloths and crystal glasses. "Look at it," I said, holding it up for Mrs. Higgins to see. "This is from 3 years ago. She threw a ceramic plate at me because I burned a creme brulee. I needed 7 stitches. Mrs. Higgins gasped, her hand flying to her throat. I flipped the page. "Here is the urgent care discharge paper," I said, tossing it onto the dining table. It slid across the wood and landed next to the roast turkey. "Here's the police report I filed that night, but didn't pursue because I wanted to protect my father." I pulled out a stack of printed emails and text messages. "And here," I said, my voice rising just a fraction, "are 3 years of messages, every time she called me worthless, every time she threatened to cut me off from my dad, every time she told me I was nothing." I slammed the folder down on the table. The sound made the silverware jump. "This isn't the first time," I said, looking at the guests, meeting their eyes one by one. "I was silent once. I almost let her convince me that I deserved it. But today she slapped me because I tripped, in front of all of you. I will not be silent again." Victoria was trembling now. She looked at the documents scattered on her perfect table. "Those are fake," she whispered, her voice cracking. She photoshopped them. She is lying." I saw it. The voice came from the end of the table. It was Mrs. Peterson, a woman who had been friends with Victoria for a decade. She was pale, clutching her napkin, but she was looking at Victoria with a mixture of horror and recognition. "Mrs. Peterson?" Victoria pleaded. Tell them she provoked me." "I saw you hit her, Victoria," Mrs. Peterson said quietly. She was apologizing. "She offered to pay for the dress. And you hit her. It was awful." "She is my daughter," Victoria screamed, losing control completely. "I can discipline her however I want." "I am 27 years old," I yelled back, the first crack in my composure. "I am not a child you can discipline. I am a grown woman, and you just committed battery." Blue lights flashed against the bay window. The siren chirped once, loud and authoritative, cutting off the argument. The doorbell didn't ring. The police didn't wait for it. There was a heavy knock, and then the front door opened. 2 officers from the Maple Ridge Police Department walked in, shaking the snow off their shoulders. One was a tall man with a graying buzz cut. The other was a younger woman with a sharp, observant gaze. "We had a call about a domestic disturbance," the male officer said, his hand resting near his belt. "Who called?" "I did," I said, stepping forward. My cheek was throbbing violently now, and I knew it must be bright red. The female officer looked at me. She saw the mark instantly. She walked over, positioning herself between me and Victoria. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need an ambulance?" "I don't need an ambulance," I said. "I need to press charges." "Officer, this is a misunderstanding." Victoria rushed forward, putting on her best concerned citizen face, though it was marred by the orange stains on her dress. "We were just having a little family argument. My stepdaughter is very emotional. She is overreacting." The male officer looked at Victoria, then at the juice on her dress, then at the documents scattered on the table. "Ma'am, step back," he said to Victoria. His tone was not friendly. It was the tone of a man who had seen this scene 1,000 times. "I want her out of my house," Victoria demanded, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is trespassing. She is disturbing the peace." "I was invited," I said calmly. I turned to the female officer. "Officer, if you have any doubts about what happened, this house is equipped with a ring security system. There is a camera in the kitchen that points directly through the archway into the dining room. It captured everything." Victoria gasped. Her eyes darted to the small black lens mounted above the kitchen door, a device she had installed to monitor the cleaning staff. She had forgotten it. She had forgotten that her own paranoia was now my star witness. "And," I added, gesturing to the table, "everyone here saw it." The officers exchanged a look. It was a look of professional consensus. The male officer nodded. "Ma'am," he said to Victoria, "I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "What?" Victoria laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You are joking. I am Victoria Hale. I am on the zoning board. You can't arrest me in my own dining room." "Turn around, ma'am," the officer repeated, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. The metallic clink of the cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "Douglas!" Victoria screamed. "Do something, tell them!" Dad stood by the fireplace. He looked at his wife, who was being manhandled by the police. He looked at me, standing alone with my swollen cheek and my black folder. He looked at the documents on the table, the proof of the pain he had ignored for years. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just slumped against the mantel, looking like a man whose entire world had just dissolved into dust. The officer spun Victoria around. She resisted, thrashing slightly, which only made them firmer. They clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound was final. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut on her carefully constructed life. "You are under arrest for domestic battery," the officer recited. "You have the right to remain silent, sir." "I will sue you!" Victoria was screaming now as they marched her toward the front door. "I will sue all of you. Serenity. You ungrateful little witch. I will destroy you." I watched her go. I watched the woman who had terrorized my adolescence, who had made me feel small and worthless for a decade, being dragged out of her perfect house in her stained cashmere dress, screaming like a banshee. I didn't feel happy. Happiness wasn't the right word. I felt light. I felt like gravity had suddenly released its hold on me. The female officer stayed behind with me. She looked at the folder on the table. "You came prepared," she said softly. "I had to be," I replied, my hand trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "She counts on people not being prepared." I looked around the room. The guests were staring at their plates, at the floor, anywhere but at me. The party was over. The brunch was ruined. But for the first time in my life, as I stood in the wreckage of their perfect holiday, I felt entirely, completely whole. The female officer suggested I leave Maple Ridge immediately. She said that while Victoria was in custody, bail would likely be posted within 24 hours, and it was best if I was not in the same zip code when she returned. I drove back to Seattle in a daze. The adrenaline that had sustained me during the confrontation had evaporated, leaving behind a trembling exhaustion. My left cheek throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a hot, pulsating reminder of the violence. My hands shook so badly on the steering wheel that I had to pull over twice just to breathe. When I finally unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence was different. It was not the lonely silence of before. It was the silence of a fortress. I threw the black folder on the coffee table, took 2 Tylenol, and collapsed into bed fully clothed. I slept the sleep of the dead, a black, dreamless void. I woke up to a phone that was practically vibrating off the nightstand. It was Monday morning. The world had not stopped just because my family had imploded. I had 42 notifications on Facebook, 12 missed calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and a string of texts from Jade asking if I was alive. I opened Facebook first. That was my mistake. At the top of my feed, shared by 3 of my aunts and half the neighborhood of Maple Ridge, was a status update from Victoria Hale. She must have posted it the second she got out on bail. Victoria Hale is feeling heartbroken. I never thought I would have to address something this personal publicly, but my reputation and my family are under attack. Yesterday, my stepdaughter Serenity, whom I have raised and loved as my own for 17 years, suffered a severe mental health episode at our family brunch. In her confusion, she injured herself and then called the police on me, making wild, hurtful accusations. It breaks a mother's heart to see a child struggle with delusions, but we are committed to getting her the professional help she so clearly needs. Please pray for our family, and please respect our privacy as we navigate this tragedy. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. In one paragraph, she had erased the assault, framed herself as the saint, and labeled me as mentally unstable. The comments were nauseating. Oh my God. Victoria, I am so sorry you have to deal with this. I always knew there was something off about her. Sending love. You are such a strong mama bear. Then I saw Dad's post. Douglas Taylor had never posted anything more controversial than a picture of a grilled steak. But there it was, a long, rambling paragraph clearly dictated by Victoria, or perhaps written out of his own desperate need to preserve the status quo. Douglas Taylor. To our friends and family, Serenity has been under a lot of pressure at work lately. The stress has been building up, and we think she just snapped. We love her, and we forgive her for the scene she caused. We just want her to come home and talk to us instead of involving the law in family matters. Please don't judge her too harshly. She isn't herself. He had thrown me under the bus to save his wife, to save his comfort. He had publicly declared his daughter was having a breakdown. He had validated her lie. My chest felt tight. I scrolled down. The neighbors in Maple Ridge, the people who had eaten my food and drunk my wine for years, were piling on. Ungrateful brat. One wrote, "Calling the cops on your parents? That is a new low." Another said, "I heard she threw a pitcher at Victoria first." A third lied. I felt the tears prickling, hot and stinging. They were winning. They were rewriting history before the ink on the arrest report was even dry. I reached for the phone to delete my account, to hide, to disappear. Then my phone rang. It was Emily Rhodes. "Don't you dare delete it," she said. She didn't say hello. She just launched straight into strategy. "I am looking at the screenshots Jade sent me. This is gold. Serenity. Absolute gold." "Gold?" I choked out, my voice raspy. "Emily, they are destroying me. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. My dad said I snapped." "Let them talk," Emily said, her voice cold and sharp like steel. "Right now, Victoria is charged with criminal battery. That is a matter of public record. By posting this, by claiming you injured yourself and that you are delusional. She is not just lying. She is committing defamation per se. She is accusing a victim of a crime and damaging your professional reputation. And Douglas? He is corroborating it. They are digging a hole, and they are handing us the shovel. I can't take it, I whispered. I can't have people thinking this. Then correct the record, Emily said. You have the evidence. You have the police report number. You have the photo of your face. You have the truth. They are fighting a PR war because they know they are going to lose the legal war. So fight back, but do it smart. Stick to facts. No emotion. Just documentation. I hung up. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek had bloomed into a dark purple blossom, spreading from my cheekbone to my jaw. It was ugly. It was undeniable. I took a photo, no filters, no angles, just the raw, swollen truth. I sat down at my laptop. I opened a blank document. I didn't write with the trembling hand of a victim. I wrote with the precision of a content lead who knew exactly how to structure a narrative. Title: The Price of a Spilled Glass of Juice. I have remained silent for 17 years to protect my father's happiness. I have accepted the role of the unpaid servant, the scapegoat, and the punching bag because I was told that is what good daughters do. Yesterday, that silence ended. My stepmother, Victoria Hale, claims I had a mental episode. The reality is simpler. I accidentally spilled orange juice on her dress. In response, she struck me across the face in front of 20 witnesses. This was not an isolated incident. It was merely the first time she did it with an audience. Attached is a photo of my face taken 5 minutes ago. Also attached is a redacted copy of Police Report 409-22, filed 3 years ago after she threw a ceramic plate at me, requiring 7 stitches in my shoulder. I did not press charges then. I am pressing charges now. To my father, Douglas Taylor. Calling your daughter unstable to cover up your wife's violence is not love. It is complicity. I am not confused. I'm not having a breakdown. I am simply a woman who decided that being a good daughter wasn't worth being abused anymore. I attached the photo of the bruise. I attached the photo of the old police report. I hit post. Then I turned off my phone. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I watered my plants. I tried to breathe. When I turned my phone back on 2 hours later, the world had inverted. The post had been shared 4,000 times. The comments section on Victoria's status was no longer a safe space for her sympathy baiting. It had become a battlefield. Strangers, thousands of them, had flooded in. You hit her over juice? Are you serious? I just saw the daughter's photos. That bruise is not self-inflicted. Victoria Hale, you are a monster. But it wasn't just the anger at Victoria. It was the messages in my inbox, hundreds of them. I read your story. My stepdad was the same way. Thank you for posting this. I thought I was the only one. My mom always told me to keep the peace, too. You are so brave. I sat on my floor and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I wasn't alone. The gaslighting didn't work when the lights were turned on by 5,000 people. By Tuesday, the story had jumped from Facebook to TikTok. A popular creator who analyzed family law cases did a breakdown of my post versus Victoria's. She pulled up public records. She found the arrest log from Sunday. Victoria Hale is lying, the creator said to her 2 million followers. Here is the booking photo. Here is the charge. Domestic battery. You don't get booked for that because your stepdaughter is delusional. You get booked because there is probable cause. A feminist blog titled The Invisible Daughter wrote a long-form piece using my story, referring to me as S, to discuss the Cinderella complex in affluent American suburbs, how emotional abuse is often masked by expensive decor and public politeness. Victoria panicked. On Wednesday night, a video appeared on her Instagram. She was sitting on her beige sofa, wearing a soft pink sweater, looking directly into the camera. Her lighting was perfect. Her makeup was done to look natural and slightly teary. Hi, everyone, she said. her voice wavering. "I just wanted to come on here and say, I am sorry if anyone felt hurt by what happened at my home. Families are complicated. We don't always get it right. I love Serenity, and I forgive her for what she is doing to us online. I just want peace." It was the classic non-apology. "I am sorry if you felt hurt. I forgive her." The internet devoured her. Comment 1. "You forgive her? You got arrested. Lady." Comment 2. "This is the most narcissistic thing I have ever watched." Comment 3. "Show us the receipt for the dress, and she will show us the receipt for the stitches." The facade of the perfect stepmother wasn't just cracking, it was shattering under the weight of her own ego. She had tried to use social media to silence me, forgetting that the internet loves a receipt, and I had brought the whole filing cabinet. On Thursday morning, Emily Rhodes sent a courier to the house in Maple Ridge. It contained a cease and desist letter demanding the immediate removal of all defamatory posts by Victoria and Douglas. But that was just the warning shot. "We are filing the civil complaint tomorrow," Emily told me over the phone. "We are suing for battery for the slap. We are suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress for the years of abuse, and thanks to their Facebook posts, we are adding a count of defamation of character. We are going to ask for damages that will make her wish she had just paid for the dry cleaning." "And the criminal case?" I asked. "The district attorney has the video from the kitchen camera," Emily said, sounding satisfied. "The police seized the hard drive. The DA is not dropping this. She slapped you. Serenity, on camera, in front of cops. She is not looking at a misunderstanding. She is looking at a plea deal or a trial." I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. It was raining again, but for the first time in a long time, the gray didn't feel oppressive. It felt clean. I checked my phone one last time. Dad had deleted his post. He hadn't texted me. He hadn't called to apologize. He had just quietly removed the evidence of his betrayal, hoping I wouldn't notice. I noticed. I blocked his number. I looked at the block list. Victoria was there. Now Douglas was there. The silence from Maple Ridge was finally absolute. And in that silence, I started to hear my own voice clearly for the first time in 17 years. The social media war was over. They had fired the first shot, but I had fired the last one. Now, we were moving to a different battlefield, one with a judge, a jury, and no place for them to hide behind a filtered photo. The courtroom smelled of floor wax, old paper, and the specific, stale anxiety that hangs in places where lives are dismantled. It was March, 3 months after the brunch. 3 months since I had walked out of the house in Maple Ridge with a bruised cheek and a folder full of secrets. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Emily. She looked like a warrior in a charcoal suit. Her papers organized with military precision. On the other side of the aisle sat Victoria. She had traded her cashmere and diamonds for a modest navy cardigan and a simple pearl necklace. She looked small. She looked fragile. She looked like a harmless suburban mother who had been unfairly dragged into a nightmare by a vindictive stepchild. Next to her was her lawyer, a man named Mr. Blackwood, who reportedly charged $700 an hour. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a reputation for destroying victims. Dad was there too, sitting in the gallery behind Victoria. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the back of Victoria's neck as if it were the only anchor in a storm. The trial for the assault charge had been grueling. Mr. Blackwood had spent the morning painting a picture of me that was almost unrecognizable. According to him, I was not a victim. I was a struggling, emotionally volatile millennial who was jealous of my stepmother's success. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Blackwood had purred, pacing in front of the box. "We are here because of a spill, a simple, unfortunate accident involving orange juice. Mrs. Hale." In a moment of shock, reacted reflexively. It was not malice, it was a reflex. But the plaintiff? She saw an opportunity. She saw a chance to turn a household mishap into a payday. This is not about justice. This is about a young woman who wants to squeeze money out of the parents who have supported her for years. He used the words gold digger without actually saying them. He painted Victoria as the generous provider and me as the leech. I felt the heat rise in my neck, beside me. Emily didn't flinch. She just wrote something on her legal pad. Wait for it. When it was our turn, Emily didn't use flowery language. She used the folder. She projected the photo of my face from the day of the brunch onto the courtroom screens. The bruise was purple and ugly, spanning from my cheekbone to my jaw. "This is not a reflex," Emily stated calmly. "A reflex is pulling your hand away from a hot stove. A reflex is blinking when dust gets in your eye. This," she pointed to the screen, "is a full-swing strike with enough force to rupture capillaries, and it was not an isolated incident." She introduced the black folder into evidence. The room went silent as she walked the jury through the timeline. The urgent care records from 3 years ago, the photo of the 7 stitches in my shoulder, the police report, number 409-22. Then she played the audio. It was a recording I had taken 6 months prior, during a visit where I had forgotten to buy the specific brand of coffee Victoria liked. "You are useless. Serenity. You are just a waste of space in this house. I don't know why your father keeps you around. You are pathetic." Victoria's voice rang out through the high-quality courtroom speakers. It wasn't the soft, cultured voice she used in public. It was a guttural, venomous snarl. I saw the jurors shift in their seats. Victoria stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. But the real blow wasn't the audio. We all knew the assault charge would likely stick, given the video evidence from the kitchen camera. The real blow, the one Emily had been saving, was about to land. "Your Honor," Emily said, checking her watch, "the defense has characterized my client as a financial burden, a woman motivated by greed who relies on her father and stepmother for survival. To refute this characterization and to establish the motive for the defendant's controlling behavior, I would like to call a rebuttal witness, Mrs. Evelyn Grant." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A small, elderly woman with white hair and a sharp tweed jacket walked in. She carried a cane, but she moved with purpose. I frowned. I didn't know her. But as she passed the defense table, I saw Douglas go pale. He actually gripped the bench in front of him, his knuckles turning white. Victoria looked confused, then terrified as she recognized the woman. "Mrs. Grant," Emily began after the witness was sworn in, "can you tell the court your former profession?" "I was a paralegal and estate manager for the law firm of Davis & Klein for 40 years, Mrs. Grant said, her voice crisp and clear. "I also served as the personal accountant for Mr. Douglas Taylor and his late wife, Mary Ann Taylor, from 1998 until 2005. "You knew Serenity's biological mother?" Emily asked. "I did," Mrs. Grant said, looking at me with a softness I didn't understand. "She was a wonderful woman, very smart, very protective." "And did you assist Mary Ann Taylor in drafting her final will and testament before she passed away?" "I did." "Mrs. Grant?" Emily walked to the evidence table and picked up a sealed document. "Is there a reason why Serenity Taylor, the beneficiary, has never seen the full contents of this will?" "Objection!" Blackwood jumped up. "Relevance? We are litigating a battery charge, not probate court." "It goes to motive, Your Honor," Emily shot back. "The defense claims Serenity is financially dependent and motivated by greed. This evidence proves the opposite, and it proves why the defendant sought to control and suppress her." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Overruled. Proceed." "Mrs. Grant took a breath. "Mary Ann established a trust for Serenity. It included the proceeds from her life insurance policy and the deed to a small rental property in Seattle. At the time of her death, the value was approximately $300,000. With interest and property value appreciation, the trust is now worth significantly more." I sat frozen. $300,000? A house? I had spent my 20s scraping by on an entry-level salary, eating ramen, terrified of missing rent. I had borrowed money from Dad for car repairs and been made to feel like a beggar. "And who was the trustee?" Emily asked. "Douglas Taylor," Mrs. Grant said, shooting a glare at my father. He was to manage the funds until Serenity turned 25. However, there was a specific stipulation regarding the transfer of control. "Please read Clause 7B, Emily said, handing her the document. Mrs. Grant put on her reading glasses. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Clause 7B, the safety protocol. Mrs. Ye Grant read, "In the event that the legal guardian or their spouse is convicted of any form of physical abuse, domestic violence, or endangerment toward the beneficiary, Serenity Taylor, the age restriction on the trust is immediately voided. Full control of all assets, including the property and the principal funds, shall transfer immediately to Serenity Taylor, regardless of her age at the time." The words hung in the air. "Thank you," Emily said. She turned to the jury. Serenity didn't know this money existed, but Douglas knew, and Victoria knew. They knew that if Victoria's abuse ever came to light, if she was ever convicted, they wouldn't just lose their punching bag. They would lose control of nearly $500,000 in assets that they have been using as their own personal safety net for years. I turned to look at my father. He was staring at the floor, his face a mask of shame. He knew. All those times he told me to keep the peace. All those times he told me to apologize to Victoria. It wasn't just cowardice, it was greed. He was protecting the money. He was protecting the secret. Victoria looked sick. Her hands were shaking violently in her lap. The narrative of the greedy stepdaughter had just evaporated, replaced by the image of two adults robbing an orphan. "Serenity," the judge spoke up, breaking protocol slightly. He looked down at me from the bench. "Were you aware of this trust?" I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. "No, Your Honor," I said, my voice trembling. "My father always told me Mom died with nothing. He told me he paid for my college out of his own pocket and that I should be grateful. He made me feel like a burden every single day." The judge looked at Douglas. The disgust on his face was mirrored by every juror in the box. "I didn't know until Ms. Rhodes found the old filings during discovery for this suit," I added. The rest of the trial was a blur. Mr. Blackwood tried to cross-examine Mrs. Grant, but the damage was catastrophic. The jury wasn't looking at a family dispute anymore. They were looking at a crime scene. When the verdict came back, it took less than 2 hours. "We find the defendant, Victoria Hale, guilty of domestic battery." The judge didn't go easy on her. He sentenced her to 2 years of probation, mandated 52 weeks of anger management classes, and issued a permanent restraining order. She was forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me. But the real justice happened in the civil ruling that followed immediately after, based on the evidence presented. The judge declared that the conviction triggered Clause 7B. "Mr. Taylor," the judge said, addressing my father directly, "you are hereby ordered to dissolve the trust and transfer all assets, including the title to the property at 1402 Pine Street, to your daughter within 30 days. Furthermore, I am ordering a forensic accounting audit of the trust to ensure no funds were misappropriated over the last 10 years. If a single penny is missing, you will be facing charges of embezzlement." Victoria put her head in her hands and sobbed. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was the ugly, desperate sound of a woman who realized she had lost everything because she couldn't control her own temper. I walked out of the courthouse into the thin spring sunlight. The air tasted different. It tasted like freedom. Emily walked beside me, packing her briefcase. "You okay?" she asked. "I have a house," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "I have a house. Emily, my mom left me a house." "She left you a way out," Emily corrected. "She knew. Somehow, she knew you might need a parachute." I looked back at the courthouse doors. Dad and Victoria were coming out. They were arguing. Victoria was gesturing wildly, blaming him, blaming the lawyer, blaming the world. Dad just looked old and defeated. They stopped when they saw me. For a second, I thought Dad might come over. I thought he might try to explain, but then he saw the way I was standing, straight, chin up, shoulders back, and he realized that the daughter he could manipulate was gone. He turned away and got into his car. I turned to Emily. What happens now? Now? Emily smiled. Now they get audited. And you? You go start your life. I got into my car and sat there for a long time. I touched the spot on my cheek where the bruise had faded. It was gone, but the lesson remained. I drove to the address Mrs. Grant had mentioned in court. It was a small craftsman bungalow in a quiet neighborhood, currently rented out to tenants. I parked across the street and just looked at it. It wasn't a mansion like the house in Maple Ridge. It was modest. It needed a paint job. But as I looked at it, I didn't see a building. I saw my mother. I saw her protecting me from beyond the grave, reaching through time to hand me the keys to my own safety. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The legal fees had been deducted from my account, leaving me with barely enough for rent. But for the first time, the number didn't scare me. I was broke, but I was rich. I was alone, but I was safe. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the ghosts of Maple Ridge in the rearview mirror, shrinking smaller and smaller until they were nothing but dust. The fallout did not happen with a bang, but with a slow, suffocating slide into reality. In the movies, the villain is vanquished, the hero walks into the sunset, and the credits roll. In real life, the credits never roll. You just have to keep waking up every morning and dealing with the debris. The court documents were a matter of public record. I did not leak them, and I did not have to. The local newspaper in Maple Ridge, a publication that usually dedicated its front page to high school football scores and charity bake sales, ran a Sunday feature that shattered the town's polite silence. The headline was simple: The Secret Files of Maple Ridge, How One Daughter Documented a Decade of Abuse. They did not use my name, referring to me only as the plaintiff, but in a town that small, anonymity is a myth. Everyone knew. The article detailed the police report from 3 years ago. It mentioned the stitches. It mentioned the text messages. It painted a picture of a house that looked perfect on the outside, but was rotting from the inside out. The reaction was swift, and it was brutal. Victoria's career was built on trust. She sold the dream of the happy home. No one wanted to buy a happy home from a woman who had been convicted of beating her stepdaughter in her own dining room. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Jade, who kept an ear to the ground, that the listing started to drop off within a week of the verdict. Sellers called Harborview Realty and requested a new agent. Buyers stopped returning her calls. The agency, terrified of the bad press, did not make a scene. They simply let her go. Her profile vanished from the website overnight, erased as if she had never been their top producer. For a woman like Victoria, who measured her worth in commission checks and social standing, this was a death sentence. She became a pariah in the very circles she used to rule. The charity board asked her to step down. The country club memberships were quietly allowed to lapse. Then came the financial reality for my father. Douglas Taylor had spent the last 10 years living a life he could not afford, subsidized by his wife's income and the secret cushion of my mother's trust fund. Now, both were gone. The forensic audit ordered by the judge was invasive and humiliating. Every coffee, every vacation, every car payment was scrutinized. He had to pay back a significant sum that had been misappropriated over the years, disguised as maintenance costs for the trust. I saw him once, from a distance, about 2 months after the trial. I was driving through downtown Seattle, and I saw his car at a stoplight. It wasn't the gleaming luxury SUV he usually drove. It was a used sedan, 5 or 6 years old. He looked gray. He looked tired. He was smoking a cigarette with the window cracked, staring blankly at the traffic. I didn't honk. I didn't wave. I just felt a heavy, dull sadness in my chest. He was a man who had traded his integrity for comfort, and now he had neither. The collateral damage hit Ethan and Chloe the hardest, and that was the part that kept me up at night. I learned from a cousin that they had been pulled out of their private prep school. The tuition was no longer feasible. They were enrolled in the local public high school starting in the fall term. I imagined them walking into a new cafeteria, carrying the weight of their mother's scandal, the whispers following them down the hallway. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. the kind that sits in your throat and tastes like iron. Did I do this? I asked myself. Did I ruin their lives? Then I would look at the photo of my bruised face. I would remember the feeling of the ceramic plate shattering against my shoulder, and I would remind myself, I did not cause this. Victoria caused this when she raised her hand. Douglas caused this when he looked away. I simply turned on the lights. If the room was messy, that was not the fault of the person who flipped the switch. I channeled that energy into the bungalow. The house my mother left me was small, nestled in a quiet neighborhood in West Seattle. It had been a rental for years, painted in generic beige and smelling of other people's lives. I spent the spring scrubbing it clean. I used a portion of the trust fund, money that was supposed to be mine all along, to renovate. I tore out the dark, heavy carpets that reminded me of Maple Ridge. I refinished the original hardwood floors until they gleamed like honey. I painted the walls a soft, airy sage green. I filled the house with plants, a fiddle-leaf fig in the corner, succulents on the windowsill, a massive peace lily by the front door. I wanted life. I wanted oxygen. On the mantelpiece, where Victoria would have put a pretentious vase or a posed family portrait, I placed a single-framed photo of my mother. She was laughing in the picture, her hair windblown, her eyes crinkled with genuine joy. It was the first time in 17 years that I could display her photo without someone making a snide comment or accidentally knocking it over. This house had no shouting. It had no passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. It had no walking on eggshells. When I dropped a glass in the sink one evening and it shattered, I flinched, waiting for the scream. Silence. Just the sound of the refrigerator humming. No one yelled. No one told me I was useless. I swept up the glass, threw it away, and sat on my kitchen floor and cried tears of sheer relief. Back at Pixel Rise, the office was not immune to the gossip. People had seen the article. They had seen my Facebook post. I would walk into the break room and conversations would stop abruptly. I heard she sued her own dad, someone whispered near the copy machine. Yeah, but did you see the bruise? Another replied. It was Jade who put an end to it. One afternoon, she stood up in the middle of the open plan office, her voice cutting through the low hum of chatter. Hey, everyone, Jade said, looking around with a fierce, protective glare. Just so we are clear, Serenity is a survivor of domestic violence who just won a massive legal victory. This isn't a Netflix documentary for you to binge-watch and dissect. It is her life. So unless you are walking over there to tell her she is a badass, keep your mouth shut and do your work. The room went silent. After that, the whispers stopped. A few female colleagues came up to me quietly, slipping notes on my desk that said, I believe you or you are strong. But mostly, they gave me the space to just be a professional again. I needed more than just work. Though, I joined a support group that met on Thursday nights in a church basement. The first time I went, I sat in the back and didn't say a word. I listened to women who had been hit, women who had been stalked, women who had been financially controlled. Their stories were different, but the underlying current was the same. The erosion of self. The slow conviction that you are the crazy one. By the third session, I raised my hand. My name is Serenity, I said, my voice shaking. And for 10 years, I thought I was the problem. Saying it out loud to a room full of strangers who nodded in understanding was like lancing a boil. The shame drained out of me. I realized that Victoria's greatest weapon hadn't been her hand or her words. It had been my isolation. By connecting with these women, I was disarming her retroactively. Then came the text from Dad. It was late on a rainy Tuesday. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I saw his name, and my heart did that familiar, painful flip. I hadn't blocked him yet. A small, stupid part of me was still waiting for him to be a father. Dad, Ren, I hope you are happy. We had to sell the lake house today. Victoria is barely eating. She is depressed. I know she made mistakes, and I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. But did you have to go to the press? Did you have to ruin us completely? I didn't think my daughter could be this cruel. We are family. I stared at the screen. I am sorry, but... There it was. the conditional apology, the victim blaming. He acknowledged she made mistakes, a soft word for criminal assault. But the real crime, in his eyes, was my refusal to suffer in silence. He was mourning his lake house, not his relationship with his child. He was worried about Victoria's appetite, not the fact that she had terrorized me. He still didn't see me. He only saw the inconvenience I had caused. I typed my reply. My fingers were steady. Me. I hope you are safe. Dad. Truly. But the lake house was bought with money that Mom intended for my protection. You losing it isn't cruelty. It is accounting. I didn't ruin the family. I just stopped carrying the wreckage for you. I can't be your daughter right now. I need to be my own person. I need safety and respect. And you can't give me either. I hit send. Then, before he could reply, before he could guilt-trip me about his blood pressure or Victoria's tears, I opened his contact settings. Block caller. It felt final. It felt like amputation. Painful, but necessary to stop the gangrene from spreading. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my safe, quiet house. I felt lonely. The orphan status I had been running from for years was now official. I had no parents. But then, a few days later, a notification popped up on my Instagram. It was a message request from an account with no profile picture and a generic handle like user77829. I almost deleted it, thinking it was a bot or a troll from Maple Ridge. But I opened it. User77829. Hey Serenity, it is Ethan. Chloe is here too. We made this account so Mom wouldn't see. My heart hammered. User77829. We just wanted to say thank you for the stuff with the trust fund. We heard Dad talking about it. We didn't know they stole that from you. That is messed up. User7777829. And about the brunch, we were scared to say anything to the cops. Mom was freaking out, but you were right to call them. She has been really intense lately. We get it now. We miss you. Maybe when we are 18, we can come see your new house? Hope you are okay. I read the message 3 times. Tears blurred my vision. Hot and fast. They weren't lost. Victoria hadn't managed to poison them completely. They were seeing the cracks. They were understanding the truth. I didn't write back a long manifesto. I didn't want to get them in trouble. Me. I am okay. I miss you both so much. My door will always be open to you when you are ready. Study hard. Be safe. I am rooting for you. I put the phone down. I walked out to my small backyard. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking apart, revealing a patch of pale, washed-out blue. They had fallen. Their empire of appearances had crumbled into dust and debt. I was still standing. I was scarred. I was tired. And I was alone in a house that smelled of fresh paint and wet earth. But as I took a deep breath of the cool air, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for permission. I was just living, and that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. 6 months had passed since the trial, and the silence in my life had become a luxury I was finally learning to afford. The sage-green walls of my bungalow in West Seattle were no longer just painted surfaces. They were the boundaries of a sanctuary. I had started gardening. I had started sleeping through the night without the aid of melatonin. I had even started dating a nice architect named Mark, who didn't panic when I said I needed space. Then, the phone rang. It was Emily Rhodes. "Don't panic," she said, her voice professional but edged with annoyance. "But they are filing a motion. Victoria is appealing the civil damages ruling, and she is asking the judge to modify the restraining order." "Modify it?" I asked, gripping my coffee mug. "Modify it how?" "She wants it lifted," Emily said. "Her lawyer is arguing that the estrangement is causing her undue mental anguish and that she needs to facilitate a restorative justice dialogue with you to heal the family unit. She claims the financial penalty is preventing her from seeking the therapy she needs." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She wants her money back, and she wants to force me to listen to her excuses. "Essentially," Emily agreed. You don't have to come to the hearing. Serenity. I can handle it. It is just a motion hearing. It will be administrative. I looked out the window at my peace lily, basking in the sun. I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who would have hidden in her apartment, terrified of confronting the monster. No, I said. I am coming. Are you sure? I am done hiding behind you. Emily, I said. If she wants to talk about healing, let's talk about healing. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The courthouse was the same, but the atmosphere felt different. The first time, the air had been thick with fear. This time, it just smelled of floor wax and bureaucracy. When Victoria walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The Victoria of my childhood was a creature of armor, cashmere, hairspray, diamonds, and control. The woman who walked into the courtroom was fraying at the edges. Her roots were showing, a stark gray against the blonde. Her clothes were expensive but ill-fitting, as if she had lost 20 pounds from stress. She looked hollow. But when she saw me, that familiar spark of malice flickered in her eyes before she quickly smothered it with a mask of tragic suffering. Douglas was not there. I heard he was working double shifts at a firm in Tacoma to pay off the audit penalties. He couldn't afford to take the morning off. The hearing began. Victoria's new lawyer, a court-appointed defender because she could no longer afford Mr. Blackwood, made the argument. Your Honor, he said, my client acknowledges the incident at the brunch was regrettable. However, the financial judgment has left her destitute. She has lost her career. She has lost her social standing. She believes that the punishment outweighs the crime. It was, after all, a single slap, a momentary lapse of judgment in a high-stress environment. She simply wants the opportunity to apologize to her stepdaughter and begin the process of reunification. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, do you have anything to add? Victoria stood up. She gripped the table. Her voice was tremulous, a perfect performance of remorse. I just miss my family, she whispered. I raised Serenity. I loved her. I was under so much pressure that day. I just want to tell her I'm sorry and put this ugliness behind us. Is that so wrong? She looked at me, tears swimming in her eyes. It was the same look she used to give Dad right before she convinced him that I was the problem. The judge turned to me. Ms. Taylor, would you like to respond? I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were still. I didn't bring a prepared speech. I didn't bring the black folder. I just brought myself. Your Honor, I said. My voice was lower than usual, but it carried to the back of the room. Victoria says it was a single slap. She says it was a momentary lapse. If that were true, I might be willing to listen. I turned my body so I was facing her. I looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had haunted my nightmares for 17 years. But it wasn't one slap, I continued. It was 10 years of unpaid labor where I was treated as staff in my own home. It was the Christmas I spent scrubbing floors while you opened gifts. It was the time you threw a plate at me and I needed 7 stitches. And you told me to clean up the blood before the guests arrived. It was the 3 years you spent telling everyone I was mentally unstable to cover your own cruelty. It was the fact that you and my father hid my mother's will for a decade so you could live off the money she left for my safety. Victoria flinched. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm. I didn't sue you to destroy you, Victoria, I said. I sued you because every time you hit me, or screamed at me, or humiliated me, you were teaching me a lesson. You were teaching me that violence is normal as long as you call it family. You were teaching me that my body and my dignity didn't matter as long as your reputation remained intact. I took a breath. I am 28 years old, and I am finally unlearning that lesson. I don't want your apology because it isn't real. You are not sorry you hit me. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry the money stopped. I don't want reunification. I want peace, and peace means never seeing you again. I sat down. Emily stood up then. She handed a document to the judge. Your Honor, Emily said, regarding the defendant's claim that the financial judgment is purely punitive, I would like to submit evidence of how Ms. Taylor has utilized the funds awarded to her from the trust and the civil suit. The judge took the paper. Her eyebrows went up. Ms. Taylor has established the Marianne Taylor Fund, Emily stated clearly. It is a nonprofit grant program designed to provide emergency legal and housing assistance to women attempting to leave abusive domestic environments. Every cent of the damages Victoria Hale paid is currently being used to help other victims escape people like her. Serenity is also volunteering her time to speak at shelters. Emily turned to Victoria. So, no, the money cannot be returned. It is already doing the work you refuse to do. Victoria went white. It was the ultimate blow. Her money, the money she worshipped, was being used in the name of the woman she replaced, to fight the very behavior she embodied. The courtroom was silent for a long beat. The judge took off her glasses. She looked at Victoria with an expression that was not angry, but deeply pitying. Motion denied, the judge said. Her gavel did not bang. She just set it down with a final thud. The restraining order remains permanent. The financial judgment stands, Ms. Hale, in all the paperwork your lawyer filed. There were pages about your suffering, your loss, your reputation. There was not a single paragraph acknowledging the actual harm you caused. The judge looked at me. The only person in this room who has accepted responsibility for their life is the victim. Case closed. The bailiff ushered us out. I walked into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I felt light, weightless, as if I had been carrying a backpack full of stones and someone had just cut the straps. Serenity. I stopped. I knew that voice. Douglas was standing near the water fountain. He must have slipped out of work early. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, his suit jacket slightly frayed at the cuffs. He wasn't allowed in the courtroom because of the restraining order against Victoria, so he had waited in the hall. The security guard took a step toward him, but I held up a hand. It is okay, I said. I walked over to him, stopping 6 feet away. You look good, he said awkwardly. He didn't know how to talk to me anymore. I am good, Dad, I said. He looked toward the courtroom doors where Victoria was still arguing with her lawyer. He rubbed his face with a trembling hand. Was it worth it? He asked. His voice was thick with bitterness. Look at us. Ren, look at what happened. We lost the house. Victoria is a wreck. Ethan and Chloe won't talk to us half the time. You destroyed this family. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had spent my childhood trying to please, the man I had protected, the man I had lied for. I realized I didn't hate him. I just didn't need him. I didn't destroy the family. Dad, I said softly. The family was broken a long time ago. It was broken the day you chose her comfort over my safety. It was broken every time you told me to be quiet when I was bleeding. It was broken when you stole my mother's money. He flinched, looking down at his shoes. I didn't break it, I repeated. I just turned the lights on. Now you all have to live in the mess you made, but I don't. I am still your father, he whispered, a desperate plea to the old dynamic. I know, I said. And that is the saddest part of this whole story. Goodbye, Douglas. I didn't call him Dad. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I could hear him breathing behind me, but he didn't follow. He didn't have the strength. I walked out of the courthouse and into the parking lot. I got into my car. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I drove home in silence. The city passed by, the coffee shops, the parks, the skyline, but I saw none of it. I only saw the road ahead. When I pulled up to my bungalow, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the sage-green siding. I walked up the steps. I put my key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I stepped inside. The smell of lavender and old books greeted me. It was the smell of my life. I closed the door and locked it. And then, I slid down to the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest, buried my face in my hands, and I wept. I cried for the 10-year-old girl who lost her mother. I cried for the teenager who was told she was useless. I cried for the young woman who spent 3 years hiding a black folder in her bag because she was terrified of her own house. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release. It was the feeling of a fever finally breaking. It was the feeling of the poison finally leaving the wound. I cried until I was empty, and then I stood up, I washed my face, I made a cup of tea. I walked out onto the small back balcony that overlooked the garden. The twilight was settling in, turning the sky a deep, bruised purple. I opened my laptop. I had promised the website, The Invisible Daughter, that I would write a final entry, a closing chapter to the story that had gone viral and given hope to so many strangers. I sat there for a moment, watching the first stars appear. I thought about the slap. I thought about the orange juice. I thought about the silence of the room before the glass shattered. I began to type. The words came easily now. They flowed out of me. No longer secrets, but testimony. I wrote about the trial. I wrote about the trust fund. I wrote about seeing my father in the hallway and finally walking away. And then, I typed the final paragraph. The day my stepmother slapped me just because a glass of orange juice spilled. She didn't know I had the files, the lawyer, and the courage ready to press charges. She thought she was punishing a subordinate. But the heaviest sentence wasn't the one the judge handed down to her. It was the sentence I had been serving for 17 years, the role of the victim. And that day, right there in the dining room, was the day I finally took it down. I hit publish. I closed the laptop. I took a sip of tea. I breathed in the cool night air. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't Serenity the victim, or Serenity the stepdaughter, or Serenity the witness. I was just Serenity, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story on Lila Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear that it is never too late to find their voice.